This season of On the Contrary is supported by Edelgift Foundation, an organization that works to support the growth of small to mid-sized nonprofits working at the grassroots in India. Edelgift's mission is to transform communities by enabling leaders, organizations, and the ecosystem of philanthropy as a whole. Over the last decade, the institution has invested billions of rupees in the Indian development sector and has been leading collaborative action towards building an independent, resilient civil society.
So I think there is a need to take a much more integrative approach that is beyond quantitative, in which, we spend a lot more time on qualitative conversations, understanding the cultural context within which interventions need to be delivered, and truly getting the communities more empowered and engaged and giving them more agency in determining the kinds of interventions they want to receive.
There is such a strong justification behind the mathematical evidence that almost everybody, and actually there are people now in the impact world who have come up with a numerical mathematical outcome which they believe if you get 5.672 marks in our mathematics, then you are more impactful than somebody who is getting 4.98, without actually understanding how that mathematics is leading to it. And the more accurate they are becoming, the more convincing they are for the larger pools of capital to go with them.
Hi, I'm Shreya Adhikari, and you're listening to On the Contrary by India Development Review, or IDR, a show featuring unlikely conversations on topics that affect our future. On this podcast, hear differing perspectives from leaders and experts as they help us make sense of the most pressing issues of our time. Your host for the show is Arun Maira, a thought leader who has the unusual combination of having worked in the private sector, the social sector, as well as the government, where he was a member of India's Planning Commission. Here's your host, Arun Maira.
This season, we've been talking about some of the big issues of our times, from India's vaccine rollout strategy to climate change policy, and how these are affecting India's most vulnerable citizens. And we've been looking at how we could think about these challenges differently and approach them differently so that we are more likely to get results faster and better than we have been getting so far. Today, we are talking about social impact, what it means, how we should measure it, and what needs to change and how we are going about it. Our world today is facing one giant crisis after another. And in the middle of it all are social impact organizations that are working hard to ensure that the most marginalized communities are able to cope with these shocks. They are operating as a crucial link between the government, its policies, and the people. They are also the ones fighting on behalf of the most vulnerable in our country so that they may access basic rights like education, water, healthcare, and safety. While most of these organizations agree that positive social impact is the goal, they differ on their definitions of social impact and their approaches to creating it. For instance, how do they define the success of interventions? How do they know when they have created lasting social impact? Do they measure the number of people an intervention has helped? Or do they focus on whether the intervention has improved overall well-being in society? Who gets to decide what counts as impact? Funders, social impact organizations, or the people that they are meant to serve? Hari Menon and Vineet Rai are going to help us make sense of these questions. Hari leads the India office of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, one of the world's largest foundations. He also oversees their work in South and Southeast Asia and has been closely associated with the foundation since 2006. Vineet is the founder and chairperson of Aavishkaar Group, one of India's first impact investing firms operating across Asia and Africa. Before starting Aavishkaar, he was the CEO of the Gujarat Grassroots Innovations Augmentation Network, an organization helping rural innovators translate their ideas into commercially viable ventures. So let's jump right in. As a warm up to our conversation today, let me start by asking you both, what is impact and how should we define and measure it? Coming to you first, Vineet.
This is a debate I have had since the time we coined the term impact investing. The impact that I define for myself is very different for the impact that my investor sitting in New York sees, and is very different for the person I'm trying to impact, because their aspiration for impact is very different. So how do I give myself the prerogative to decide an impact metric and then measure it as well, and claim that the more you measure, the better impact you deliver? So I think the idea of measurement of impact actually stems from the fact that we already know what is impact. And since we know impact, we have the right to actually make more of it. Inadvertently or invariably, that approach has led to creation of more damage. None of us know when the impact scales up, whether it actually adds up in positive or it is adding negatively to the whole society. So from a very simplistic term, I found it very difficult to not find an impactful organization, because whether you go to Reliance or Tata's or anybody, they are making some positive impact, some negative impact. Probably we are trying to talk about the summation of the negative and positive and see, is there a end result which is positive, and then you call it an impactful enterprise. For example, instead of setting up a factory and trying to actually manufacture shirts, are you going to rural India, working with rural artisans, which is a far more cumbersome, complex process, and getting shirts stitched in the villages and then bringing them to urban world to sell them? Both the approaches are creating impact. But in one, you are not really trying to move all the workers to one place and creating a new ghetto to get a shirt stitched and create livelihood. In the other, probably what you are doing is you are taking livelihood where people live. So you're not displacing them, and in the process, actually allowing a local ecosystem to thrive and strive. And I think it's very difficult for a large number of people to actually give this context to the idea of impact, especially when we are talking about impact investing. And so, therefore, it has been simplified to create the ghetto because it's far more efficient, far better. So, acknowledging that what we are doing is probably efficient but less impactful probably is the first way to go.
Thank you so much, Vineet. And I want to pick up 3 or 4 points from it. The first is, who decides what is impact? Is it the expert or is it the people for whose sake you're doing what you say you're doing, whatever it is? The second is the summation of impacts, an interesting concept. Everybody thinks they're doing something impactful, and they probably are impacting a part of the system, but the unintended consequences of improving one part of the system on the rest of the system may actually reduce the well-being of everyone in the system. So, systems thinking is essential, and collaboration amongst all parts working together. And the third one, which I want to pick up, is hugely important. We've been talking about the measurement of impact, but you sort of turned it on its head, and you used the phrase, the impact of measurement on the conditions of societies. Hari, you've been engaged with solving many problems on scale. So I want to ask you the same question. How should we be thinking of and measuring impact?
Our foundation is driven by, that line, all lives have equal value. So at one level, the impact we try to track is work improving the well-being of the communities whom we are trying to serve. Now, where it gets more complicated is, our approach to serving these communities is through often what are seen as vertical programs. We work with partners or we work with the government on health interventions, on nutrition, on financial inclusion, on sanitation, on agriculture-based livelihoods, and increasingly also looking at gender equality as a bedrock. And what we find is you can get locked into a particular program and the impact metric for that. So for example, with vaccines, you might think of it as there's a very clear metric, which is obviously you need to have an efficacious product that's cost effective for a country to roll out. But once that's there, how do you maximize coverage of the populations that will benefit from the particular vaccine, whether it's in the case of COVID, it's the entire adult population. Many of the vaccines that we work on, it's children. You can track how you're moving forward with that particular metric, and you can, for that, then set up the systems to deliver that. The challenge comes when you start to look at, okay, did delivering that particular intervention improve health overall? And the systemic impact on all the resources, the infrastructure, the people that it takes to deliver that intervention, did it lift all boats? That's where things get trickier. And if you start looking at what impact are you having there, is the infrastructure in the right place? Does it have the right kind of quality? Are the people there when communities need them? Are they trained? Do they have empathy? On the community side, do people have the awareness, the knowledge, the information they need to be able to make their best choices? What are the power equations that determine the choices that they make? So if you start looking at the system overall and then ask yourself, okay, did you have impact? Then it gets a lot more complicated. And my only hope is that we are looking at the lives of the people whom we are aspiring or hoping to serve. The other is, we end up looking at numeric measures of impact because, that's what the world seems to value and understand. But two problems with that. One is, you often default to averages, and averages hide inequities and, variations. On the average, India is much better off on many development indicators vis-a-vis a couple of decades ago. But if you drill down, you get down to state numbers, you get down to district numbers, you get down to block numbers, the averages hide huge variations. And we don't often factor in those variations into how we are thinking about improvements and change. And that's where, this focus on numbers and averages can have a distortive effect. The second is the point of sustainability, and sustainability to my mind only comes if the people are really bought into the change that is supposedly to improve their lives. And this urge to measure often takes us towards supply side interventions because those are easier to track, those are easier to control, and we leave out the factors around, demand, cultural norms, all of which can have a lasting influence on impact well beyond the time period of interventions. So I think there is a need to take a much more integrative approach that is beyond quantitative, in which, we spend a lot more time on qualitative conversations, understanding the cultural context within which interventions need to be delivered, and truly getting the communities more empowered and engaged and giving them more agency in determining the kinds of interventions they want to receive. It's going to flip strategy for a lot of folks, including us, make it much more difficult. But my sense is if we don't do that, then we'll continue playing this chicken and egg of, you solved one problem, created another one, now, go after that. To me, that's just not a great way to go about, trying to contribute to meaningful impact.
Hari, there is actually a very good mathematical reference to the problem we are facing. It's called circular reference. So you change one math, it comes back, and therefore you can never solve the problem. I think the idea about impact and measurement, specifically the focus on quantity and numerical superiority of reporting, is essentially a circular reference. Until the time we don't call it out, there is such a strong justification behind the mathematical evidence that almost everybody, and actually there are people now in the impact world who have come up with a numerical mathematical outcome which they believe if you get 5.672 marks in our mathematics, then you are more impactful than somebody who's getting 4.98, without actually understanding how that mathematics is leading to it. And the more accurate they are becoming, the more convincing they are for the larger pools of capital to go with them. I had a very significant discussion with somebody, and they said, listen, there is so much of accuracy in their calculations of impact, that we feel far more comfortable giving money to them than people like you who are talking about so much challenges and impact as there is impact. So we'd feel very uncomfortable dealing with you guys. And I don't see anything wrong with what they are doing. It is just that factually incorrect. Because you have a circular reference, unfortunately, we have to just make them aware of it. It's not about right or wrong. It's just that people are unaware that this is a circular reference problem.
At this point, we'll take a small break and we'll hear more from our guests on the other side.
See, in the beginning, there was no language. We know that we are the scavengers. And why we are scavengers, we don't know. And who said we are scavengers, we don't know. There were many problems we faced in the beginning. We don't know that what to talk about. Now we are clear. We are talking about the liberation. We are talking about the rehabilitation. We are talking about the elimination. These are the words we are brought later stages.
That's Bezwada Wilson, a lifelong crusader against manual scavenging and the systemic discrimination that it perpetrates against Dalits in India. Bezwada was born into a Dalit family of manual scavengers, and he channeled his outrage into building a grassroots movement to liberate his community from this practice. In 2016, he was awarded the Ramon Magsaysay Award for his efforts. You can learn more about his life's work on IDR Interviews, a special feature that shines a spotlight on social change leaders and their efforts to shift the status quo in the country. Check it out on www.idronline.org. And now, back to Arun Myra.
I want to stay with this idea of quantitative metrics. Vineet, you've been connecting the world of finance to the world of people for many years. In fact, impact investing in India began with your firm, Aavishkaar, which has been investing in companies for financial, social, and economic returns since 2001. And so I want to ask you, is there space to shift the conversation on impact with investors and companies who approach you? What will it take for them to go beyond the quantitative and have a more nuanced and qualitative understanding of social change, Vineet?
Most venture capitalists say that we are a partnership, but the reality is that's not the truth. So when people who have money, they start understanding that money should be treated as a commodity, and that commodity arbitrage is not power, which means you have to actually be a partner in the true sense, then probably the community focused activity to bring about change, or as Hari said, the systems and then people and different aspects or dimensions of that will work through. Otherwise, it's very difficult. As we're trying to deal with the world of money, when it talks to an intermediary like me, the only skill that they are seeking from me is that when you take over my money, you will make it work on the most efficient paradigm, which I said is the old paradigm. The new paradigm is not the most efficient, but the most sustainable and resilient. And the problem is people see that efficiency is equal to sustainable and resilience, which is not exactly the correct understanding. And how do you explain to those people who are sitting such far away with only capability is trillion of dollars behind them, that efficiency is not necessarily what will deliver sustainability? And this conflict is a very deep and inherent conflict. And now I have actually had this debate with a lot of very successful and very large corporate CEOs. And I think their ability to understand this conflict is very limited. Even now, when we are actually challenged with, climate is actually a very good example. Growing trees seems to be a very good solution. But now the debate has moved on that people who are actually dealing with creating the biggest amount of pollution are now more interested in buying carbon offsets than changing their behavior of drilling in the Arctic. So there is an inherent conflict. So they will keep drilling in the Arctic, but keep buying carbon offsets. Will that actually solve the problem? And I think in Europe, this discourse has become quite mainstream, that you cannot continue to dig a bigger and bigger hole while putting in small amount of soil in India or in underdeveloped countries while digging out the whole North Pole or South Pole for oil. It may not work. So those challenges actually they're becoming much more stark, they are becoming complex, they're aware. But I think the fight between efficiency and sustainability and resilience, which comes from the community, is still not well understood. And I think so we are at early stage of this discourse.
This debate about efficient measurement of impact versus sustainable social change clearly lies at the heart of the matter. But I want to introduce another crucial aspect, and that is scale and creating impact at scale. For social impact organizations, serving more communities and growing the reach of a program geographically are important goals. Showcasing the scale of a particular program is important to keep the funders satisfied and the nonprofit running. More the numbers, more is considered to be the impact at scale. Hari, in a country as large and diverse as India, where social impact organizations are solving numerous problems, how should they be thinking about creating impact at scale? Is there a way they can move beyond just numbers and use a more qualitative approach to measuring impact?
I think my primary reflection is when we think of scale, there is often this monolithic vision of scale, which is an organization, an intervention that can be done all across massive geographies, massive populations. That's what's going to drive change. In the corporate sector, you often do see that, right, where entities that are successful grow and they get bigger and bigger and bigger and swallow up more and more and more. And that's how scale is thought of. I think in the social sector, in the development context, scale might actually need to be thought of very differently. The only way we can have impact at scale is through effective partnerships of different actors who know, understand, can engage with communities on the different sectors where the government and partners are trying to make a difference. And I think that is the beating heart of any impact at scale aspiration. And my sense is, unless that kind of a partnership is put together, which has the ability to then inform, the actors with the money and the technical wherewithal to be able to support the interventions that are needed to make changes. Here's how you'll need to change your health delivery approach, or here's, how you'll need to change the approach to agriculture, or here's why kids in this particular district or this particular block don't show up, which may be very different than another part of the country. And people make those changes to the intervention strategies. I don't think we'll end up with impact at scale. We'll have intervention at scale, but that's very different than impact at scale. And right now, I think a lot of mental energy goes into the intervention at scale, right? How do you come up with the frameworks, the operational guidelines, cascaded down? That totally shortchanges the fact that all of these interventions and guidelines will land in very different contexts, very different realities. And if you're not creating the intelligence and the ownership to problem solve, evolve and morph those interventions and guidelines into whatever is called for locally, we will not have impact. Now, my sense is, again, I like to be an optimist, because if you do the work that I do, you'll drop out within a year if you're not an optimist, right? I see more and more conversations around collaboration and partnerships starting to happen in philanthropy, with government, even within civil society organizations, which to me is a fundamental starting point for any of these discussions. I mean, I has at the Gates Foundation, I've got to stop looking beyond just my catchment of NGOs and partners and what they're doing that's working. I also need to look at the people who approach problems very differently than us and see if their approaches are working, and then see how, we can learn and, actually empower them to do work differently. How can we let go so that, we can have impact? And I think that's where, with the government, letting go is not natural. But again, there are people both at the center and in the states who are starting to talk more and more of this lingo. And I think COVID has been a bit of a wake-up call, because everyone's realized that the interventions to manage COVID, whether on the supply or demand side, worked best where government, community organizations, the voluntary sector and private sector came together effectively, and it did not work as well where the top-down approach worked. So my hope is that's an evolution that's underway. Whether we make it wholeheartedly or not remains to be seen. But I like the construct of something like the aspirational districts, if we use it as a learning lab for these kinds of questions.
So, in this terrific discussion with the two of you, what I'm walking away with is that measuring impact only in numbers is perhaps oversimplifying the complicated nature of social change issues. Human beings and their environments are complex, and so the solutions for change must also be complex. All our systems are interconnected, and while solving for one problem, we must keep many other factors in mind. And so we need to relook at how we measure impact, who gets to define what counts as impact, and who must be involved in ultimately creating it. Thank you both very much for this conversation today and for giving us lots to think about. I hope it will change how many of us, if not all of us, view and pursue social impact.
On the Contrary is produced by Rachita Vora, Smarinita Shetty, and me, Shreya Adhikari. This episode was hosted by Arun Maira for IDR. Production by Made in India. IDR is an online journal that publishes cutting-edge ideas, lessons, and insights written by and for the people working on some of India's toughest problems. You can check us out at idronline.org or find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or LinkedIn. If you like our show, please do subscribe and leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts from, so more people can find out about us. You can also email us on write to us at idronline.org. Thank you for listening and see you next week.